Committee will come to order. We're going to resume the consideration of the nomination of Representative Deb Haaland to be the Secretary of Interior. We had a very good hearing yesterday until we had to recess for votes. And all but two of our members had a chance to ask one round of questions before the recess. In addition, a number of members asked for a second round of questions, and Congressman Haaland, you were graciously agreed to return and answer questions today, and we appreciate that very much. So we appreciate your courtesy in accommodating us, and we are going to pick up where we left off yesterday by recognizing Senator Kelly, and we'll follow up by Senator Risch before we start our second round of questioning, if Senator Risch is on or if he comes in. Okay? Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to echo your comments from yesterday about the historic nature of Congresswoman Haaland's.
Hold on one second. We're getting some feedback somewhere. Was that you? No.
How about now? Is that any better?
Let's try it again and see if it, okay, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I wanted to,
Nope. Where are we getting that from?
I don't hear it. It's something on your side of the, Maria, do you hear it?
There's a female voice coming through like they're talking when we're talking here.
Okay.
Mark, go ahead, start again.
About the historic nature of Congresswoman Haaland's nomination. There's never been a Native American at the helm of the Department of Interior before. So I asked unanimous consent to add to the record several letters of support from Arizona tribal governments endorsing Congresswoman Haaland's nomination.
Without objection?
Thank you. Congresswoman, I'd like to ask you about drought and the Colorado River. As you know, the Secretary of the Interior is called the Water Master of the Lower Colorado River. If confirmed, you would have extraordinary authority through the Bureau of Reclamation to curtail water deliveries from Lake Mead to Arizona, to California, and to Nevada during years of severe drought. The President has not yet nominated a commissioner for the Bureau of Reclamation. But what are your thoughts on increasing resources from DOI to expand reservoir capacity, water recycling, and groundwater management in Colorado River states?
Senator, thank you so much for the question. And living in the Southwest, I realize and understand how important water is, and sometimes how little there is of it. We know that water is the lifeblood of the West and the Southwest, and I know that we're experiencing severe droughts currently. So it's important for us to pay attention to this issue. It's important for us to conserve, to think about ways we can conserve water. Water recycling is a great way to do that. I know that it's best if we seek consensus, consensus-based solutions to these issues. I have said many times yesterday that I will absolutely consult with you and with all the members of this committee. It's important. Congress is a co-equal branch of government. So I think if we work together, of course, we can find ways to find solutions to some of these issues. And yes, I understand how important water is to Arizona.
Well, and Native American water settlements is also a significant issue for Arizona tribal communities. Would you be willing to prioritize the completion and full funding of existing and future Indian water settlements?
Senator, I know that that's also extremely important. It's and I look so forward to working with you on these issues. But I know there's several water settlements currently in New Mexico as well. It'd be nice to get those done.
You know, the Grand Canyon, is a very special place for our entire nation, not just Arizona. Yesterday, Senator Sinema and I introduced legislation to permanently ban uranium mining on federal land outside of the boundary of the Grand Canyon, outside of Grand Canyon National Park. and I know you're familiar with this issue. Can we count on your support for a permanent ban on uranium mining?
Senator, I look forward to, again, discussing this issue with you. I realize that there are people who live nearby there, and it would be important for us with any mining to make sure that, that it doesn't harm people, that health and safety are top priorities, and that the sacredness of the Grand Canyon and other historical places are protected.
The Havasupai tribe relies on, water that could be potentially contaminated by a uranium mine if that was allowed around the Grand Canyon. So thank you. And I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Senator. And now we have Senator Risch.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. Ms. Haaland, good morning. Did you or do you now support the Biden action and the administration's action of shutting down the Keystone pipeline his first day in office?
Excuse me, Senator. Thank you for the question. I feel very confident that the president, his decision, I have to respect it, sir. He is the president of the United States, and I realize that these are some of the things that he talked about when he was running for office, and I believe that those are some of the reasons why he was elected. I know that President Biden cares deeply about our environment. He also cares about jobs, though, and so I know his Build Back Better plan is going to work if we can all work together to create millions of jobs, and I look forward to helping him move his plan forward.
Do you support his decision to shut down the Keystone pipeline? That's a simple yes or no. I got a filibuster, but I'd like a yes or no.
Thank you, Senator. I will tend to support President Biden's positions, and if I am confirmed as secretary, it is his agenda that I would seek to move forward.
Do you support closing down the Keystone pipeline?
Senator, I will just say that I support President Biden's agenda.
Do you support shutting down the Keystone pipeline?
Senator, if I say that I support President Biden's agenda, I assume that you could take my answer as a yes.
Thank you. And could you tell me why that is?
Well, one of the reasons why is that I support President Biden. I think he's thought deeply about these things, and I think that he cares deeply about our environment, and I do as well.
And you told me that you did support his shutting down the Keystone pipeline, but I'm looking for your reasons why you think that's a good idea.
Senator, I'm not sure that I have a full answer for you other than to say that I know that there are a lot of people in this country who care deeply about our environment, and that is one area that folks have been passionate about. I know there's a lot of passion on both sides of the issue.
Yeah, there sure is, particularly people who have lost their jobs as a result of that and are losing good, high-paying jobs for that. One of the reasons I'm pressing you on this is I'm having real trouble reconciling that with the fact that we can't get the administration to move to shut down the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The last administration, we pushed and pushed, and they did get it shut down, but now the Russians have found other ways around it. They're trying to complete it. Congress, on a bipartisan basis, has passed legislation to urge the administration to use the sanctions that we said were required and shut down the Nord Stream 2 construction, and yet the administration won't do that. How do you square shutting down jobs in the energy sector in the United States, but yet permitting and indeed encouraging jobs in the energy sector in Russia? That doesn't make sense to me.
Senator, it's my understanding that there is only a pause on the new leases the new gas and oil leases. Currently, the existing valid leases are moving forward. Permitting is moving forward. I understand that. I know that the department currently is moving those permits forward. I don't know all the particulars of every permit that's been signed, but I know that President Biden isn't looking to shut everything down. The existing permits and leases will continue.
But no new ones?
There is a pause on the new ones.
For how long?
Sir, I couldn't tell you that. As soon as the review is done of the fossil fuel program and the federal government, it looks like the pause will be lifted.
Well,
But I don't have particularly any specificity on that.
Well, back to the issue on the Russian pipeline, it would seem to me that the administration could spend a good amount of its energy on stopping those jobs in Russia, which is a national security issue for us. And yet instead they're using their energy to do this to American workers, which just doesn't seem, it just doesn't seem logical sitting here looking at it as it is. Well, if I might have just a couple more minutes, Ms. Haaland, we, as I look around the committee here, mostly western states here, all have large tracts of public lands, as I'm sure you do in your state also. And it's, I can't tell you how important those are to us. We've gone through, over the years, we've gone through constant wrestling with the federal government on the use of those lands. In Idaho, we've been successful in doing collaboration on the ground. We've got we've got a roadless rule in Idaho, which was put together by us, by Idahoans, on a bipartisan basis. Other than Colorado, we're the only one in the United States. Again, we've had the United States government pushing on us, trying to get around that after time has moved on, and we're holding on to it. But I hope that you will, when you're confirmed, work with us on a local basis, on the ground, instead of sending us directives from D.C. It's a real problem for us that have these large tracts of public lands. Thank you very much. My time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman Haaland, yesterday you came into Senator King to review the methane waste prevention rule. The methane waste prevention rule. Mm-hmm. The majority of that rule was nullified by a district court judge last summer. And the fact of the matter is there's just far too much methane that's being emitted. We all know that. In 2019, oil and gas operations onshore federal lands vented or flared almost 75 billion cubic feet of methane. That was an 83% increase from 2015 levels. This is especially troubling because venting and flaring of methane can be prevented. We know that. That doesn't happen on private land. So I started asking questions, why are we wasting this product? Why would any company in good conscience let that much value go up in the air when they could be selling it and putting it in the product line? Their problem was this: we cannot get permits to put in the pipelines to take the methane off property because they couldn't get the permits. And only thing I'm saying is if we've got this resource, we're using this resource, we're going to need an ability to have a permitting process that's going to allow us to take the methane off rather than polluting it, because they've got legal leases they're working on. So the only thing I would ask you, if you will work with us on finding a pathway forward to make this a reality and not vent 75 billion cubic feet of methane.
Senator, I would be happy to work with you on this issue. I know that millions of dollars go up every year that could be spent on our public schools. Certainly in New Mexico, that's been the case. We do need to reduce the methane pollution, and of course that can create jobs, absolutely, and also care for our climate. So I appreciate that. I think benefiting the taxpayers is always a good idea, and I would be happy to help find solutions to that issue.
The main thing is the permitting process we're going to need help on, and I'm going to ask you to work with us on that to make sure that we can get this and not flare it, not vet it or flare it. And I think it would be tremendous for the environment, tremendously helpful. I want to get facts on the record that make sure that we're working from the same page. It is my understanding that the oil and gas industry continues to hold 26 million acres under lease onshore, 12 million acres offshore. Of the nearly 53% of those acres onshore and over 77% of those offshore are unused and non-producing. So they have the leases in hand. They just have never produced them. So I have defended President Biden saying, I want to take a pause. I think we need to look at this inventory and finding out why or what their intentions are of the leases they're holding. Over approximately 7,700 oil and gas permits are approved, but currently unused. With these APDs in hand, companies have obtained the necessary authorizations they need and begin operations that they're choosing. We haven't shut anybody down. We're not stopping anybody. And I want people to know that. It's also my understanding that the executive action taken by the president put the pause on gas leases to allow the new administration to review the leasing program, which I have asked for also. I want to know what the termination or what the term of these leases are, how much they're paying for these leases, why they're holding so many with non-productive status. And I believe it's prudent to conduct a review of leasing these process and want to work with you. So my question would be, will any company with existing leases, as you understand, if they have those existing leases, will they still be able to apply for the permits or begin operations based on the existing permits they have, the APDs, on those existing leases, including those that are currently non-producing? So if I have 2,000 leases, I'm producing 1,000 of them, could I move to my next leases without running into impeding my process on that from the government agency or the Department of Interior?
Chairman, thank you so much for the question. It is and now I'm not at the department yet, so I don't know every single issue. However, it's my understanding that, yes, permits are still moving through. I know that each permit might require something different with respect to how they're reviewing it, but it is my understanding that they are moving those through, and I agree with you that a review is a good idea, and
we're going to bring the companies in and find out that basically if there's going to be a reach back to where there's putting additional regulations that they won't be able to use the leases they've already obtained legally and gone through the permitting process. We want to make sure there's a fairness to it. And if we have better ways to basically improve our environment in doing that, such as pipelines taking methane off, no methane flaring, things of this sort, but give them some kind of a reprieve, that there's a possible way of doing everything that we need to do and be much healthier for the environment and our climate. So with that, my time has expired, and I will go to Senator Barrasso.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Representative, yesterday, when discussing the effects that the President Biden's ban on oil and gas leasing have had on workers, you stated, quote, you said, "I feel like in the short term, hopefully, their jobs have not been affected." You made that statement yesterday. Their jobs are being affected now. I have a letter from the Northern Arapaho Business Council in Wyoming. I don't know if you're familiar with the members of the Northern Arapaho tribe in Wyoming, and they are opposing the president's ban on leasing. The Northern Arapaho Business Council letter states, delays in leasing have already negatively impacted small to mid-sized operators. The longer the orders remain in place, the more revenue will decline and result in additional blows to our economy, the oil and gas workforce, and to Wyoming's education system. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter this letter into the record of the hearing today. Thank you. Next, I'd ask that my chart be put up on the screen so you have a chance to see it. I also have a copy of it behind me. You have stated that you are, quote, wholeheartedly against fracking and drilling on public lands. You have said that, quote, we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground. You have also stated that you oppose all fossil fuel infrastructure. If confirmed, President Biden is likely to ask you specifically whether he should extend the ban on oil and gas and coal leasing on federal lands and waters. Now, you've said repeatedly that President Biden's agenda is your agenda. But what this committee wants to know is, how will you advise him? That how will you act? Because you're the principal role as Secretary of Interior. So how will you advise him, and will you encourage the president to extend the 60-day ban on leasing or not?
Thank you, Ranking Member. I appreciate the question. And yes, I will reiterate again, President Biden's agenda would be my agenda if I am confirmed. I recognize that roles are different. The role of a congresswoman in one district in the country is much different than the role of a secretary who is fighting and working for every single American in all of our public lands across the country. Those are two different things. I recognize that. I want to make sure that if I'm confirmed that we're looking at things and working to strike the right balance. We need to care as much about the environment as we do about the fossil fuel infrastructure in your state and other states. We need to balance those priorities, and I feel that yes, sometimes it might seem like a tricky sort of balancing act, but I feel very strongly that if we have a mind to protect our public lands for future generations, that we'll also be able to protect jobs for future generations as well. I am very much excited about the opportunities that lie ahead, and Chairman Manchin and I have spoken about this, the technology opportunities, the innovative opportunities for workers across this country, and I think there are a lot of workers who want to have jobs of the future. And so what I would like to do is just make sure that I am doing everything I can to help President Biden in his Build Back Better plan to create millions of jobs across the country.
Well, let's talk about those workers and their jobs for the future, because in 2018, you campaigned on eliminating oil and gas production in New Mexico. And you were specifically asked how you would make up for the loss of oil and gas royalties, which the state uses to fund public schools. And your answer was you would vote to legalize cannabis. That was your answer. And that you said, if we legalize cannabis and we have a new funding stream for our education system, that will help tremendously. That was your statement. Do you still believe that states should replace oil and gas royalties used for public education with taxes on the sale of marijuana? Is that your position?
Well, I think the point of that, Ranking Member, was to say that we should diversify our funding streams for our education and not just rely on one.
So is selling marijuana among what the Biden administration calls better choices that the Biden administration has promised to give displaced oil and gas workers? Is that the better choice, marijuana?
Ranking Member, I honestly don't know what President Biden's stance is on cannabis currently.
But we know what your stance is on replacing the revenue from the energy jobs, the jobs that power our economy and the energy that powers our country. And your preference is to turn to drugs, is what you've recommended to the voters. At a time when we know when there's high unemployment and energy workers lose their jobs, we've seen it in West Virginia, we've seen it around the country, there's been an opioid crisis in this nation. And yet what I hear from you is the answer in a better choice world is marijuana. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is Senator Sanders, we had him where he might be, but he might have had to go to another meeting. If Senator Sanders is on, if he's not, I'm sure he'll come back. If not, I'll go to Senator Hirono. Senator Hirono? Is Senator Hirono on? If not, I'll go to Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Haaland, for being here with us again today. Wanted to pick up a little bit where we left off yesterday. We were talking about national monuments. I think it's important for us to remember that, as I mentioned yesterday, disproportionate share of all national monuments that have been designated on land in the United States over the last 25 years about 28%, as I recall, have been designated in Utah. In the past, we've had reforms made to the Antiquities Act at times when one state or another has been picked on relentlessly and disproportionately. One significant reform occurred in 1950 when Congress reacted to a decision made a few years earlier by President Franklin D. Roosevelt when he proclaimed the Jackson Hole National Monument after Congress had declined to expand the Grand Teton National Park. And he undertook similar action by presidential proclamation under the Antiquities Act. So Congress responded to that and basically exempted Wyoming out of future national monument designations. You had Congress responding again a few decades later in 1980 and making significant Antiquities Act reforms specific to the state of Alaska, which had itself found itself the victim of excessive national monument designation. This had occurred after President Jimmy Carter had proclaimed 15 new national monuments, even after Congress had adjourned without passing a major Alaska lands bill that was strongly opposed within the state. And so there's something of a pattern here when there's a pattern of overaction by presidential administrations to declare new monuments in a manner contrary to the wishes of the host state. Congress eventually reacts and responds. We talked a little bit yesterday about the ping pong effect. The fact that one of the unfortunate things about this is that there's a tug of war in which the status of the Antiquities Act monument designations in these states can easily become something of a ping pong ball. It hasn't happened a lot in the past, but the trend has now begun, where you've seen one president designate a monument, another president restrict that monument's size, and then you now see a move by the Biden administration to expand perhaps to, or some have suggested even in excess of, the original boundaries of the Bears Ears National Monument or the Grand Staircase National Monument. There's understandably a good reason for us to explore a legislative solution. Could you understand, however, why some of us might be concerned about legislatively designating one or more of these national monuments without some type of protection for our state, limiting for the future the amount of national monuments that could be designated by a presidential proclamation? Or alternatively, could you understand why it'd be difficult for us to negotiate with that without some kind of actual deal, some kind of protection and assurance that we won't end up losing the whole negotiation anyway, as long as the president may, through the stroke of the presidential pen, undo all of our negotiations?
Senator, I completely understand. I understand and I respect your position, and I mean, I can't fully understand because I'm not you and Utah is not my state, but I do respect your position, and I want you to know that if I am confirmed, I am ready to sit down and talk with you and the stakeholders in Utah. I know that tribal nations, it's their ancestral homeland in some respects. I would be honored to get everyone together and talk about these issues, but I want you to know that I fully respect your position, and I want to perhaps work to find a solution, and I truly do understand what you're saying, and I appreciate you sharing that with me.
So if you're confirmed, would you be willing to come to my state before any action's taken under the Antiquities Act in my state and meet with some groups of people you might not otherwise hear from, meet with groups of people who I believe have not been listened to as much in the past?
I absolutely would, Senator. I would never pass up an opportunity to go to Utah.
What do you think we can do about multiple use? Multiple use was the objective of FLPMA. It was the promise made. There are many occasions when management for multiple use really ends up just being restricted use. This often results in diminished economic activity on the part of states, and especially within rural communities, within public land states. What would you do to enhance multiple use and to make sure it actually happens?
Well, you've talked a lot, Senator Lee, about folks on the ground, about local communities weighing in on these things. And I know that multiple use is, yes, that is a tenet of our public lands. And in some places you can have more multiple use, in other places you can't. So I look to strike that balance. I think it'll be important.
And do you think that President Biden's decision to issue a moratorium on oil and gas leasing is consistent with principles of multiple use? And if so, how is that consistent? And what will you do to make sure that people have access to these things and also to access to a critical mineral supply chain?
Thank you, Senator Lee. The pause that President Biden has put on the new permits pending review, the review's not going to last forever. The review will, as soon as it's done, of course, having that input with everyone, we'll be able to move forward after that. I think that this pause will, it's just that, it's a pause. It's not going to be a permanent thing where we're saying we're restricting all these lands from something.
I appreciate that it's not permanent. If it is in fact not permanent, we'd love to know how non-permanent it is and roughly what the time horizon would look like. This has very significant impact. It might seem like an insignificant thing for someone who doesn't live there and whose job doesn't depend on it, or whose job doesn't depend on someone else's job in that field. But for many of these communities, it's their lifeblood. And it's also something upon which our national energy security often depends.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I want to profusely apologize. I skipped over our former esteemed chairwoman who ran this committee so efficiently, Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I worked as a ranking member, but Mr. Chairman, actually your question I so appreciated because of the methane rule, and I think people don't realize that a recent study found that life cycle emissions from oil and gas and coal pulled from public lands and waters were equivalent to 20% of the total U.S. greenhouse emissions. So that is, put into perspective, is like the 5th largest source of emissions in the world. That's more carbon pollution that is emitted than by Japan and Brazil and Germany. So that's what you're going to be the steward over. So I'm appreciative of what the president has done to try to get a handle on that. And just so, we're clear, I mean, we're seeing the impacts, obviously, with wildfires and disasters and changes in weather and all sorts of things. So again, I think for us, we're billions of dollars. In fact, I think NOAA said that climate disasters are $121 billion per year. So these are big numbers, so I hope we get a good picture on that, and certainly appreciate what the chairman said about the methane rule, because we don't need to be wasting and we don't need to be emitting that pollution. And just to be clear on the marijuana issue, this isn't a Seattle issue. Out of 39 counties, 20 to 25 counties in the state of Washington supported legalizing cannabis. And so I don't blame our legislature or others from getting revenue from that and put it towards public health issues in the state of Washington. This is respecting the wishes of the voters and then putting it to good use. So, but I do want to go back to the questioning of yesterday, because I talked about public lands as a great economic engine for us as a nation, and a little frustrated at the end of the last year. First of all, this committee, leadership, Chairman Manchin, Senator Dane, Senator Wyden, Senator King, myself, and others led a big effort on the Great American Outdoors Act with our colleagues, Senator Alexander and Senator Gardner. And we basically want to know that you're going to provide the leadership in investment on the infrastructure upgrade that we're looking for our national parks. In the chairman's case, the new River Gorge, I think it's Mr. Chairman, he knows that I like to go to the Dolly Sods. So, but
Not that far.
The new River Gorge is one of the oldest rivers in the United States. So upgrading that protection was critical, and now making investments there. Making investments in Mount Rainier National Park is very important to us, and Olympic National Park. We've got a 50-year-old water treatment system that needs to be upgraded. We have campgrounds and walkways in Mount Rainier that need to be upgraded. So I want to make sure that under your leadership, you're going to make sure that those dollars get spent as we've envisioned them, and that you're going to make this a priority within the agency.
I absolutely will, Senator Cantwell. Thank you.
And on the other side of that equation, I'm very frustrated by what Secretary Bernhardt did on the way out the door. I mean, talk about thwarting Congress. Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, said, we want permanent funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and then he tried to do some damaging things to try to prevent us from that. So I want to make sure that you will be seeking the full $900 million in mandatory spending for LWCF.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on the issue of PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, I don't know New Mexico's numbers, but I'm assuming you're familiar with that issue. This is critical to many counties in my state, and I think we've been thinking about ways that PILT might be able to be expanded to states that also have national wildlife refuges. That is to say that the outdoor recreation opportunities that are supported there. So would you be willing to work with us in looking at ways to expand PILT to help compensate states for outdoor recreation opportunities and things that help increase the security of our nation's wildlife refuges?
Payments in lieu of taxes is extremely important. I'm committed to making it stronger, and of course, I'd be open to ideas on how to improve that.
Okay, and then on the issue of if we are looking at this plan and we're trying to figure out how to help our public lands, USGS estimated between 2005 and 2014, federal lands sequestered approximately 15% of CO2 emissions that resulted from extraction of fossil fuels on federal land. So is there a way for us to also look at other ways to continually incent the sequestration efforts, whether that's through our forests or other ideas? Should we be looking at that as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, we'll look forward to following up on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Cantwell.
And Mr. Chairman, if I just could, I'm sorry, I know we're out of time. I'm out of time. I got 12. But the Congresswoman shared an important story with me prior to the hearing. I don't know if she can recount it into just a few, recite it in a few minutes. But there are people in Indian country all over the United States that are so proud of her nomination, and they are. I don't even know how we can explain adequately enough how much they are tuning in and looking at this moment. They feel like they've been good stewards of public land for centuries before us, and so they are so excited about her nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Daines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Haaland, welcome back.
Good morning.
I wanted to talk about the issue of critical minerals in relation to renewable energy. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is known for abysmal human rights, horrible environmental standards, they produce the vast majority of cobalt for the world, which, of course, as you know, is used for batteries in electric vehicles, renewable energy. The U.S. is relying on China as well for dozens of critical minerals and rare earth elements that are used in renewable energy, yet they've got a long track record of shady environmental standards, labor standards, as well as extensive human rights abuses. In order to produce the wind, the solar, and storage technology that we will need going forward, we'll need raw materials that must be mined and extracted from the earth. You've previously introduced legislation that would increase costs, lengthen permitting for hard rock mining. My question is, how do you plan to source raw materials for renewable energy if the policies you've supported are actually moving mining operations overseas?
Senator, thank you so much for the question. And as I have said several times before, I recognize that the role of a cabinet secretary is far different from that of a congresswoman. And so I recognize that I'm not just worried about my one district in New Mexico, but the entire country. I agree that we need to mine responsibly. We also need to be able to ensure that we have that independence into the future. Senator, this earth provides us with every single thing we need, and it has for millennia. And I feel very strongly that if we take a lot of care to make sure that we are doing everything we can have those jobs well into the future. Our grandchildren should be able to rely on what they get from the earth as much as we do.
So I appreciate your comment that you've been representing constituents in the past, and now you've got a position where you represent all of our country. Some of your prior positions you've taken, opposed to Keystone, opposed to Dakota Pipelines, protesting there, calling for bans on trapping on all public lands, stopping energy on all public lands, clearly impacts more people than just your constituents. So I'm not convinced that you'll be taking that view forward, because you certainly have been taking some very strong positions that clearly impact folks outside the first district of New Mexico. I want to put up chart 2 here and talk about some hunting and sportsmen's issues, if I could. On July 5th of 2019, you called for a ban on all public land trapping. About 6,000 Montanans are trappers, including several in the tribal communities. If confirmed, will you restrict or ban trapping on public lands?
Senator, if I'm confirmed, of course, I will look at the science. I will consult with everyone who I need to consult with. I don't intend to go in and start making rules that, I think there's processes.
So did you look at the science and the data before you came out with a statement of being opposed to trapping on all public lands?
Senator, at the time I made that statement, my constituents were concerned about that issue, and that is one that I made accordingly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, and I'll tell you, my constituents back home also have concerns with statements like that. It's been a heritage in our state, as well as across many of our tribal communities, of allowing trapping on our public lands. It's also an important conservation tool, because modern trapping practices allow you to trap an animal, release it safely for the sake of collaring and so forth. Put up chart 1, if you would, please. Semi-automatic rifles are certainly a popular choice for hunting, for shooting, target practice, all of which are part of our Western heritage. On September 23rd, 2020, you called for a ban on some semi-automatic rifles. Given your call to ban some sporting rifles, why should Congress believe that you will work to protect and expand shooting and hunting opportunities on our public lands?
Thank you, Senator. Well, I am a Pueblo woman, as I mentioned yesterday. We've been hunting wild game for centuries. In fact, that's the reason I'm sitting here today, is because my ancestors sustained themselves through those practices. As a child, many times, my dad, my grandparents, my brother, they all hunt. In fact, I was fortunate to harvest an oryx from the White Sands Missile Range several years back. It fed my family for about a year. I understand that, and I absolutely respect the sportsmen and the anglers whose traditions those are.
Regarding anglers, in 2020, you voted to allow a future administration to regulate ammo or fishing tackle, much like the Obama administration did when they banned lead ammo and tackle on public lands. Do you support a ban on lead ammo and tackle on public lands?
Thank you so much, Senator. I look forward to looking into that issue, consulting with the experts. I know there are a number of scientists at the Department of Interior. If I'm confirmed, that will absolutely be a conversation that we have.
All right, and I do hope you'll respect to the science. I know there were some unfortunate comments made yesterday about Republicans not believing in science, and respectfully would disagree. I'm a chemical engineer. We have some physicians on this committee as well on the Republican side of the aisle. And I hope you'll think about retracting that unfortunate comment that was made yesterday. If you put up chart 3, on May 10th, 2019, you co-sponsored legislation designating 7 million acres of wilderness in Montana without getting any local input or even visiting these areas. During our meeting, when I asked you if the 30 by 30 initiative incorporated public land grazing and sportsman's access, you responded, quote, "Wilderness designations still provide access to hunting." And that's entirely accurate. I agree with you on that. But you didn't speak at all the issue of grazing, which I know is a big issue for our ranchers across Montana. Wilderness designations can, in fact, hinder sportsman access, create challenges for authorized grazing. Additionally, wilderness designations preclude new grazing authorization, even when grazing is an effective conservation tool. Can you tell me if you believe that grazing qualifies as a part of conservation?
Senator, I know how important grazing is. My sister, as I mentioned yesterday, she has a ranching family, and they rely on grazing of their cattle in order to feed their families. I understand how important that is. Senator, I would be more than happy to, if I'm confirmed, to absolutely speak with the experts, talk with you, speak with stakeholders to look at this issue and to understand it more fully. I am not at the department as of yet, but I can guarantee you that I'd be happy to look into that issue.
You are the author of the 30 by 30 initiative in the House. As the primary leader there, this initiative has been exceedingly sparse on details. Does this initiative pertain to just public land or all U.S. lands?
Senator, if we could kind of
Okay.
move it along a
Right.
little bit.
Thanks.
Senator, the 30 by 30 initiative that President Biden has embraced will be an opportunity for so many Americans to participate in conserving that amount of land and water. It's not just relegated to public lands, but I understand that private landowners, Indian tribes, it's an opportunity for everyone to work together.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Is Senator Sanders with us? Has he come back? Do we have him on at all? We'll go to Senator Hirono. I think she is with us. Senator Hirono?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Congresswoman, thank you for our conversation yesterday. I heard my Republican colleagues claim that the Biden administration's efforts to address climate change and transition our country from relying heavily on fossil fuels to generating more renewable energy are going to kill jobs, and that those efforts somehow go against the very mission of the Interior Department. In fact, I'd argue that addressing climate change and creating clean energy jobs for the American people both fit squarely within the department's mission, which follows, and I'm quoting, "The Department of the Interior conserves and manages the nation's natural resources and cultural heritage for the benefit and enjoyment of the American people, provides scientific and other information about natural resources and natural hazards to address societal challenges and create opportunities for the American people, and honors the nation's trust, responsibilities, or special commitments to American Indians, Alaska Natives, and affiliated island communities to help them prosper," end quote. Conversely, nowhere does it state it is the department's mission to maintain or increase oil and gas extraction. Yesterday, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle repeatedly brought up previous statements that you have made on social media or bills that you sponsored in the House to argue that your prior positions and prior actions and policy positions, which you took in the interest of your constituents, just like we on the committee do every day, are radical and make you unqualified for the position. Yet, the prior Secretary of the Interior, David Bernhardt, who previously lobbied on behalf of the fossil fuel industry, literally had to carry around a card with a list of groups that he had to avoid in order to comply with ethics. He had some major conflicts of interest going on during his tenure as Secretary of the Interior. And it is no surprise that the actions he took as Interior Secretary routinely benefited the fossil fuel industry with which he had been long associated. But I don't recall my Republican colleagues asking whether Mr. Bernhardt would keep an open mind about other energy sources. Meanwhile, we have heard you, Congresswoman, assure us that you will be fair and open, and that it is not your goal to get rid of jobs that rely on fossil fuels, and that you would create other jobs. So we should be focused on the opportunity for America to be a leader, to lead in addressing climate change, to lead in renewable energy, technology development and innovation, to lead in protecting our resources for generations to come. And Congressman, you are someone who knows about generations, considering that you are the 35th generation of your tribe. To think sustainability, not just continuing heavy reliance on fossil fuels, knowing that climate change is and will continue to cost our country billions of dollars each year if we continue down our current path. And we in Hawaii, of course, know the impact of climate change because we are, in Hawaii as an island state, we are at the tip of the spear in what's happening with climate change, global warming, ocean acidification, all of that. So Congresswoman, considering that you will be required to navigate your way through very strongly held opposing views, as shown by the questions that you have been asked in your hearing, what motivates you to want to be Secretary of Interior and serve our country in that capacity?
Thank you, Senator Hirono, for that question. And I mean, let me just say this. If I could take the liberty of the story that Senator Cantwell mentioned to me today, or mentioned regarding me today. One of my dear friends in Iambito, Navajo Nation, Albert Shirley, he listens to this hearing on the radio, a radio I bought him that's powered by the sun because he doesn't have electricity. And he texted me this morning and said the name, the Navajo Code Talkers, the first word they decided to use when they were working on the code was Nihima, and that means our mother, and that was the code they used for the United States of America. And I feel very strongly that that sums up what we're dealing with. This is all of our country. This is our mother. You've heard the earth referred to Mother Earth. It's difficult to not feel obligated to protect this land. And I feel that every Indigenous person in this country understands that, which is why we have such a high rate of our people who serve in the military. We want to protect this country, and that means protecting it in every single way and ensuring that those jobs, that sustenance, the opportunities for our children and grandchildren to learn and grow in this beautiful country, that we keep that for many generations to come. It's an obligation of mine that I take very seriously, and that is really, I guess, giving you a perspective of why I feel that I would be honored to be confirmed and help President Biden to move this country forward in many, many ways with respect to the Department of the Interior.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And next, we have Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good morning,
Good morning.
Representative Haaland. Yesterday, when I began my questions, I spoke about the significance of the Department of Interior and the role that the Interior Department has over Alaska lands because of our structure. And it's probably too small for you here, but you've seen it because I've provided you with many of the maps. It is a patchwork of color, but that color all represents the federally managed lands that we have. And it is significant, and it is a big part of my job, and it would be an incredibly big part of your job should you be confirmed as Secretary of the Interior. I mentioned yesterday that in the initial secretarial order, there were 7 mentions of Alaska in the executive orders and the secretarial orders that specifically call us out for enhanced review, pause. The most significant of those, truly, is the Willow Project up in the National Petroleum Reserve, an area that was designated by Congress specifically for its resource opportunity. The Willow Project is very significant right now in terms of its promise. The EA, the environmental analysis that was developed using the Integrated Activity Plan, this was done under the Obama administration. The final ROD was issued last fall. Now it's part of this pause. This is, again, probably the most promising area that we have for us. It is recognized as the job creator coming on in a state that has just been devastated not only by COVID, but by all of the other economic factors that have come at us. Labor, Alaska Native groups have come out strongly in support, and I'd like to submit a couple of the letters for the record here. But my concern is that you have specifically called out this project. On May 4th of last year, you and 4 of your House colleagues signed a letter requesting then Secretary Bernhardt to act unilaterally to suspend further action on the Willow Master Development Plan. So the question is not necessarily why you signed it. You've signed it, but what I need to know is if you're confirmed, will you commit to allowing the Willow Project to proceed without additional changes or environmental review, recognizing the trajectory that this project has been on, and your role to be an impartial arbiter of permitting decisions on Willow and other similar projects?
Senator, thank you for that question, and thank you for the packet you sent me. I read all the letters, and I appreciate you providing me with that information. And yes, as we've mentioned before, I think being a secretary is far different from being a member of Congress. And so I do take that role very seriously. If I'm confirmed, I will absolutely consult with you. I understand how important your state is to you, and I just want you to know that that the opportunities to speak with you on these issues, the opportunities to speak with Alaska Native corporations and Alaska Native people will be absolutely important, and I appreciate that opportunity. And of course, I will follow the law. I know that permitting is moving forward currently in the department, and I will take it very seriously.
Well, this is not just about important to me. This is important to the state, for jobs. These are important to Alaska Natives. This is important really to the country. This is a significant project, and if we can't produce oil resources within the National Petroleum Reserve, it causes one to question where. You mentioned ANCs, and this is an issue that I would like to raise with you. This is the 50th anniversary of ANCSA, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. You are very, very well aware of that. You know that in Alaska, we set things up differently as part of the settlement. We don't have the reservation other than Metlakatla, as I mentioned, but we have a model that is significantly different. It is the alternative to the reservation system in the continental United States. ANCs are part of that tribal structure, along with our tribal health organizations, our village corporations. ANCs are not sovereign governments. They don't seek to be, but their unique structure allows for really true self-determination and economic empowerment. I'd like you to describe for me your understanding of tribal representation in Alaska and what role ANCs play, because I've been concerned with some of the statements that you have made, press releases that you have signed on to, letters that you have signed on to, that make me question whether you understand fully the role of ANCs within this framework that was established almost 50 years ago with regards to Alaska Native governance.
Thank you, Senator Murkowski. And yes, I know that Alaska is a unique situation with the Alaska Native corporations. I understand that there are also 229 Alaska Native villages within those regions. I also understand that ANCs provide services, health services, social services to the Alaska Native people. And to that regard, yes, they're not like any other corporations that when we think of corporations. So I understand that's important. Of course, I am not a scholar of Alaska, but with your help, I will absolutely learn more and be absolutely willing to make sure that Alaska Native people, whether through the Alaska Native corporations or any other organizations, get the services that they need.
Well, thank you. We'll follow up on that one because, as you know, that's very, very key. It's not just related to CARES funding. It really is about the whole governance structure and not losing the underpinnings that we've put in place for many decades. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm well over my time, and I apologize to my colleagues.
Thank you, Senator. Is Senator Sanders, would he be on? Is Bernie missing? Okay. With that, we'll go to Senator Hoeven. He's there. Senator Hoeven, is Senator Hoeven on?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it very much. Congressman, thank you for your second testimony today. Yesterday I brought up the Dakota Access Pipeline to you, and I mentioned that the three affiliated tribes, the Mandan, Hidatsa, and the Rekara, produce an incredible amount of oil. And in fact, they ship 300,000 barrels a day, 300,000 barrels a day of their production through the Dakota Access Pipeline. And the oil that they produce represents about 90% of their revenues. So again, this is what they use for their essential needs like education, healthcare, infrastructure, and really so many other things. Now, I have a statement from them in regard to the Dakota Access Pipeline, and I would ask that be included in the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
All right. So with that, Congressman, given that the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Rekara Nation ships a significant portion of their oil through DAPL each day, wouldn't a shutdown of the pipeline have devastating economic consequences for them?
Senator, if I understand the question, you're asking if the oil pipeline shuts down, if it will have a devastating effect. Senator, I would be more than happy to, I don't know the specificity of every single job there, but I can tell you that I would be more than dedicated to being briefed on that issue if I am confirmed.
Well, they produce 300,000 barrels of oil a day. That represents 90% of the revenue. And a significant amount of that oil goes through the pipeline. So wouldn't it follow that if that pipeline shut down, that's going to have a major economic impact to them?
I understand what you're saying, Senator. Thank you.
Do you agree or disagree?
I don't disagree. I understand what you're saying. If something shuts down, then jobs can be lost, and I understand that. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Congressman. If you're confirmed, will you commit on behalf of the administration to consult with the three affiliated tribes about what DAPL means for the education, healthcare, infrastructure, and other services provided to tribal members? Will you commit to that consultation with the 3 affiliated tribes?
Senator Hoeven, tribal consultation is mandated in this government, and I would absolutely consult with tribes when issues are affecting them. And I also would just add on, Senator, that with respect to the executive order that the president signed, it does not affect tribal lands, it just affects public lands, the pause on the leases.
Right, Congressman, and that is a good point and an important point, because it does affect federal lands, which we have a significant amount in North Dakota. And in fact, last year, the Department of Interior dispersed $66.7 million in revenue to the state of North Dakota for production on federal land. So it's a very important issue to us. So I understand your point about the reservation, but the moratorium does affect our federal lands. So my question in regard to federal lands and first, would you expect imports of foreign oil to go up or down if we stop developing oil and gas on federal lands?
Senator, I would absolutely, if I'm confirmed, ask to be briefed on this issue and would be more than happy to continue a conversation with you on it.
If we don't produce oil here, then it's logical that we're going to import more from places like Russia, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and other places. Do you think their environmental standards are better than ours, or not?
Senator, I am not altogether briefed on the environmental standards of other countries currently, but I am proud that here in the United States that we have put the safety and health of our workers as a priority.
Are you committed to working with us on trying to advance things like carbon capture and storage in terms of the work that we're doing, of which our state's leader? Will you commit to work with us on that?
Senator, it's my understanding that President Biden is open to many ideas about how we get to net zero. So I appreciate your ideas and look forward to speaking with you more. And of course, if I'm confirmed, I'd be willing to work with you.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. And next we have Senator Lankford.
Chairman, thank you very much. Representative, good to see you again. Thanks for doing the second day of questions with us as well. As you know, we have 200,000 miles of petroleum pipeline already in the ground in America. We have 2.4 million miles of natural gas pipeline already in America. There's a conversation about adding new lines. That's gone on here frequently. Let me talk about existing lines that are already there. Generally, would you agree that federal agencies should work with pipeline companies to be able to keep rights of way up to date to ensure access to those pipelines already in the ground?
I thank you, Senator. It sounds like a reasonable idea.
Okay. In your understanding, does the Department of Interior have the authority to deny right-of-way renewals for existing pipelines that are compliant with all applicable laws and regulations?
Senator, where the Department of Interior has the authority over such issues, they would absolutely be important. And if I'm confirmed, absolutely take a look at that. And
do you think that the Department of Interior has the authority to deny an area where they have already an existing right-of-way, though, to go in and say there's an existing pipeline already in this area? As you know, there's thousands of miles of pipeline that travel underneath federal lands right now. Do you believe the Department of Interior has the authority to be able to go in and say you no longer have right-of-way in these areas and federal lands for existing pipelines?
Senator, of course, I am not at the Department of Interior currently. I can't fully answer that question, but I would be happy to speak with you if I'm confirmed, and certainly I'm sure the department would be happy to give you an answer on that.
But do you believe that the Department of Interior should reevaluate existing pipelines under federal lands?
I Again, Senator, I can't answer that question because I don't know what the answer is. But if I am confirmed, of course, it's important to you. I would be happy to speak with you.
It's actually important to every American that wants to stay warm in the winter. And for everyone that flies in a plane or drives a car, it becomes a pretty important issue because if we lose access to pipelines that are already in the ground, that go through federal lands or have right-of-way, we lose access. And what happens is all that energy then goes to truck traffic and goes to train traffic. Do you believe truck and train traffic moving energy is safer than a pipeline, or do you think pipelines are safer than truck and train traffic?
Again, I wish I could answer that question. I don't know what the answer is, Senator. I haven't seen those statistics.
I would go ahead and tell you that it's safer and less expensive to be able to move it in a pipeline than it is on truck traffic or in train traffic. But we'll talk about that in the future. The goal of the Endangered Species Act, we've had the opportunity to be able to talk about this some. Mm-hmm. Do you believe the goal of the Endangered Species Act is to keep endangered species on the list, or is it to graduate endangered species off the list?
I think the goal is to restore species. I think the goal is to work with communities to make sure that we're restoring those species so that they can survive.
Yeah, we have a wonderful little bug called the American Burrowing Beetle.
Yes.
That is in multiple different states. We have it a lot in southeast Oklahoma. It was declared endangered and threatened before, and we did a long study on it. It's a bug that lives underground, and so we really didn't know what the population was. So for 5 years, there was a population study on the American burrowing beetle, and after 5 years of study, they found out there are a lot more of those bugs out there than anyone ever thought, and they're in a lot more places than anyone ever thought. And so for 5 years, that was the required study. It was the number exceeded every single year what the standard was to be able to set. So it should come off the list. Instead, there was a pause to say, but in 50 years, there could be a change in temperature. And if there's a change in temperature 50 years from now, it could affect that species. And so we're going to leave it on the list as threatened. So my question to you is, statistically, what do you believe about how we should handle endangered species? If they achieve all the population numbers, all the goals that were set to delist them, should we maintain all those species to say in the future they could be threatened, so we're going to leave them listed, or should they be able to graduate off if they hit those lists? And then if in 30, 40 years from now we start to see a population decline, to relist them?
Thank you, Senator. And I know that it's important to look at the science when it comes to the Endangered Species Act. And I know that every listing is different. So what I would say is if I'm confirmed, I would absolutely work with the scientists who manage these species and absolutely take a good close look. I appreciate your knowledge and caring for the beetles in your state, and look forward to working with you on that. But in the end, I believe it's science that manages that.
I do as well, and when you hit all the numbers and the targets that science had set, it seems like you would actually graduate off the program. One more quick comment on this. There's leases, there's permits, and then there's what they're called sundries. These are the various items once you've got all through the permits, and it's how you put the roads in and just the decisions that are made. Typically, those are made in each region because the leases and the permits are done. The sundries have now been pulled up to Washington, D.C. with Interior for all those decisions that are typically made in the region to now be made in Washington, D.C. My question to you is, would you plan as the Secretary to keep those sundry decisions in D.C., or would the regions be able to have those decisions again as they have in the past?
As I have said many times throughout this hearing yesterday, it's important for local communities to weigh in on important decisions. And of course, I would take a look at that if I'm confirmed, but I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate you raising that with me today.
So it's your hope that the sundry's decisions would return. Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that I am not sure. I would have to take a look at it and be fully briefed on that issue before I could give an answer, but I appreciate the opportunities for local communities to weigh in on decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cassidy.
Handled very tough. Am I on?
You're on, Senator. We hear you.
That you've handled a couple days of questioning him, and I think I can speak for all my colleagues. We're not challenging to be rude. I'm representing those families who just lost their jobs because of the cancellation of the XL pipeline, which the Obama administration science said would lower greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm trying to represent those families whose jobs are threatened by what that action indicates the Biden administration is going to do. Not based upon science, based upon a political agenda which seems to be more concerned with paying off constituency groups' expectations than lowering greenhouse gas emissions or providing employment for fellow Americans. And that's a bitter pill to take when someone doesn't give a damn about your job because they got a political agenda and they're ignoring science. Now, it's not your fault. You're just the appointee, and as you say, you're just a messenger. But nonetheless, I'm going to speak to some of that today and give more light to the consequences of a politically driven, non-scientific-based agenda which is costing Americans their jobs. So first, Senator Cantwell spoke about the Great American Outdoors Act. Turns out, oil and gas development in the Gulf of Mexico is what funds about 90% of it. So when Senator Cantwell was asking you to commit to funding it, and at the same time there is a threat to that revenue stream, that's kind of a way you can't answer that correctly. Your agenda of the Biden administration threatens the funding of the Great American Outdoors Act. It also, by the way, threatens the funding for the Gulf of Mexico, the GOMESA Act, which funds coastal restoration in my state. Now, let me just say the importance of that. By the way, when one of your predecessors, Ryan Zinke, came to Louisiana, a woman came to meet with him at a round table, and I'm quoting her. She described herself as one of the biggest liberals he would ever meet. But she understood the value of the oil and gas industry to Louisiana and more broadly to the country, given the conservation programs funded by U.S. Energy. Not a direct quote, but a good enough. So now, as regards my state, the funding we get from revenue sharing from Gulf of Mexico activity helps fund our coastal restoration, which is to say our adaptation to climate change. And at this point, I would like to introduce to the record, Mr. Chairman, a letter from my governor, my Democratic governor, John Bel Edwards, and his assistants on coastal restoration, Chip Klein, both the letter and the testimony, a letter from Mr. Governor Edwards and the testimony from Chip Klein.
Without objection.
And I'm going to quote a little bit from my Democratic governor's letter. We have a plan which will cost $50 billion over 50 years thereabouts to restore our coastline. GOMESA is the principal form of federal funding to achieve this. And canceling leases and program pause creates uncertainty in coastal planning processes, having predicted $389 million in GOMESA revenue over the next 3 years. Also, Louisiana is entitled to $9 billion of the BP settlement dollars from the Deepwater Horizon. We cannot access those dollars unless we have sufficient funds to apply. Any lag or delay in GOMESA funding calls into question the ability of Louisiana to realize the benefits of this $9 billion. Oil and gas production supports 85% of our coastal resiliency program. The consequences of these actions, this political agenda, go against the science and the economics of rebuilding my state. And by the way, you mentioned that you have relatives in Houma, Louisiana, goes against the interest of preserving their homeland. Now, I'm so frustrated by this, and it's not directed to you, it's to a political agenda which is so injurious to what's going on. Next, let me also say there's been some discussion from Senator Cantwell about the greenhouse gas activities associated with oil and gas. But from the Obama administration, again, the science, if you will, that the EIA says methane emissions in federal waters in 2019 accounted for just 2.5% of nationwide emissions. That's from the EIA. 2.5% of nationwide emissions, but 17% of nationwide oil and gas production. And when President Obama's administration finalized their 5-year Outer Continental Shelf drilling plan, the EIA said that the greenhouse gas emissions from the activities associated with lease sales would be slightly lower than not doing lease sales. Why? Because if we don't develop our domestic production, then we import from overseas. There's been several questions as regards whether or not we would import. I would say that Mr. Cruikshank, who is a career appointee at BOEM, has testified in the House of Representatives. Indeed, if we decrease production, we do import. And I would also offer for the record, Mr. Chairman, a letter in 2018 signed by Senators Cantwell, Menendez, Schumer, and Markey, which actually asks the president to ask OPEC to increase production so we could increase more oil and gas, because oil and gas prices had gone up so much. And so,
Without objection, and Senator, your time is just about over.
thank you. Not only do we have testimony that it does, but we actually have people recognizing that the shortage increases gas prices, and my Democratic colleagues asking we do that, even though the Obama administration says that if we substitute foreign production for domestic production, it increases greenhouse gas emissions. I'll close with this, Congressman Haaland. I truly hope, if you're appointed, that you're guided by science and not by the president's political agenda. You may have faith in it, but so far his current actions do not give me faith in it. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome back, Representative Haaland. As in Louisiana, Mississippi is a Gulf state, and one thing that's important to us is the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And, you know, if you're confirmed, I'm just interested in knowing what your priorities are for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and the Outer Continental Shelf.
Thank you, Senator. And of course, I am not there. If I'm confirmed, every single piece of the Department of Interior will be important. I know that there are some amazing career staff who have dedicated their careers to ensuring that we're moving this department forward. The first thing I will do is consult with each of those bureaus to make sure that I understand fully the issues. But Senator, as I mentioned yesterday too, the Congress is a co-equal branch of government. I don't intend to, in fact, I intend to make sure that you are always going to be part of this important conversation. You know your state far better than I ever will, and I would appreciate your knowledge and your consultation on all of those issues.
Thank you. Also, we've talked about the Endangered Species Act with the senator that spoke a couple of sessions ago. Mm-hmm. And farming, agriculture is the #1 industry in Mississippi. 1 out of every 4 jobs is related to agriculture. So the Endangered Species Act, to help us be productive, is very important. And I believe it's critical to utilize it. You know, any tool that's provided in the Farm Bill to conserve endangered species while improving the review process in ways that lessen the administrative burdens on government, recognizing the needs of agriculture, as well as the needs of public and private rural, suburban, and urban land and property owners, and promote confidence in the regulatory process that affects us so greatly. Will the Department of Interior, under your leadership, provide the resources to find a solution to the Endangered Species Act consultation roadblocks for pesticide review?
That sounds like an important issue, Senator, and of course, that would be important to me. So I look forward to working with you, striking the right balance, working in partnerships with folks on the ground, and certainly farmers are absolutely important to this discussion. and working to just find the solutions that we need to make sure that folks can work and sustain themselves.
And one thing that I'm hearing from my constituents is that we know that the low-income households pay a disproportionate share of their income to overall energy cost for various reasons. And since President Biden's recent executive orders restricting oil and gas leasing and halting the Keystone pipeline, I continue to hear from my constituents, especially since we've just gone last week through an ice storm that we're not used to going through. They're worried about their rising energy cost. And, you know, we had to use different sources. We had to use natural gas when electricity was out. And they're very concerned about this right now. What is the thought process behind restricting the U.S. energy production as it relates to energy affordability for my constituents, particularly for the low-income households? What's the thought process behind that if we are so sure that it's going to increase our costs to the lower income?
Senator, I think that it's important that everyone have the energy they need to sustain their daily lives. As you were talking, I was remembering my grandmother at Mesita, where I talked about yesterday, didn't get gas or electricity or running water until the mid-'70s. So I feel like this is 2021, everyone should be able to partake in those modern conveniences and certainly not break the bank. I know that having a diversity of energy resources will certainly help in times when we have these ice storms and climate events that cause power lines and so forth to go down. And I think that I always move back to the conversation I had with Chairman Manchin about technology and innovation. I think that we have a tremendous future ahead of us working to find the solutions for those things. I think that if we work together to find those solutions, that energy costs for families could absolutely go down. And I hope that that's the case. We have solar panels on our home. The electric bill is about $10 a month. I wish everyone had that.
Thank you. I know my time is out.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And now we have Senator Sanders. He's not? I'm so sorry. We don't have Senator. Bernie is missing. We keep trying, Bernie. So whenever you show up, buddy, you're ready. How about Senator Marshall?
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and welcome again, Congressman Haaland. Good to see you again. I want to start off by talking about the Endangered Species Act. And my endangered species is the lesser prairie chicken, but every state, of course, has one. And I just want to share my story about prairie chicken. My mother's farm is 10 miles from Cassidy, Kansas. Now, Cassidy, Kansas is called the prairie chicken capital of the world for a reason. And growing up, one of our rites to passage was to go prairie chicken hunting with my dad and my uncles. And I remember very vividly, 10 years of age, I had a single-shot H&R shotgun. We hunted Saturday, no luck. Sunday, no luck. And this is, you get up at 4 in the morning and you go out and you freeze. You sit in the middle of a milo field. So I was pretty distraught. And we saw one prairie chicken fly out into a prairie field of our neighbors. And I asked my dad and uncle, can I go shoot that prairie chicken? He said, oh, you don't have a chance. It'll fly before you get there. Went out, stalked it. And sure enough, 10-year-old little Roger Marshall shot a prairie chicken, his first bird, and I was a hero for the day. We took it back to the farm, and we had prairie chicken and noodles. And we've seen the population decimated. That was a greater prairie chicken. The issue is the lesser prairie chicken. I was fortunate enough to be on the Wildlife Parks and Game Commission there in Kansas, and followed the prairie chicken really closely. In 2013, it was at its nadir. And just coincidentally, 2013 was the end of a big, big drought. And As it started raining again, habitat improved and the prairie chicken population is double of what it is in 2013. And I think that's a story real common, you know, that droughts cause wildlife to go down and it rains, the wildlife comes back. But as I really dug deep into that issue, voluntary conservation was the most successful. The government projects were miserable failures, but a couple ranchers, fifth, sixth generation ranchers, did some volunteer grazing changes and really were responsible for that comeback along with some rain. So, you know, my two questions, the Endangered Species Act, is how do you feel about voluntary conservation in general? And then how do you measure success? We know how species get on the list, but how do you get off the list, just in general?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. I love that story. And yes, I am all for that. I mean, we're all stewards of this land, and if more of us took that initiative that those farmers did that you're talking about, I think our country would be in a much better place. So please thank them for me. I know that the ESA is managed by science, and I understand that, you know, we want those species to recover to a certain degree. I want you to know that I will absolutely pay close attention to this issue. I know that the partnerships that you talk about between states, between tribal nations, between local communities, those are very important for all of us to find the solutions and make sure that those species are there so that your grandchildren can have the same experiences that you had.
You know, absolutely, and that's the goal here, is those great memories that we can pass on. But just in general, though, to push a little bit, what would it look like to you for an endangered species to come off the list? I understand we're trying to follow the science, but there's when humans interact with ecology, that's when the conflicts arise. So what does it look like to be improving the species enough that they'd get off the endangered species list?
Well, I imagine that it varies from species to species, but I know species do need to recover to a certain degree, and then I understand that, you know, their habitat and so the things that keep them alive, as you well know. The difference between us and the animals is we have the ability to reason, and animals can only live by instinct. So they can't live outside of their environment. So I am going to. This is going to be an important issue for me, Senator. I promise, and I will look forward to. I'm not at the department yet. I don't have every single stat on the endangered species list, but you can bet that it will be important to me and to the department.
Okay, I want to talk about water rights just for a second. And again, going back to my boyhood, on Saturday nights, after we got all the hay hauled, we'd sit on the cellar, and everyone would bring all their stories. And from time to time, you live out in the country, there's going to be a water rights issue. And I just remember my granddad saying 3 or 4 times, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And I had no idea. Quivira Wildlife Refuge is 30 miles from my home. Beautiful refuge, a refuge that I've had the opportunity to hunt in and around it for decades as well. And there's creeks that flow into it, and they right in the middle of some really incredible corn land that we have to irrigate. And thus there's the conflict between the water rights of Quivira Wildlife Refuge and the farmers. And this corn growing is 90% of the economy for that county, 90%. I mean, this is important. These are the farmers whose babies I've delivered the last 25 years, so this is personal to me. You know, Quivira has a water right. Of course they do. And the farmers have a right as well. Quivira is a senior to it. But as I've seen through this drought, the duck numbers, the geese numbers have stayed great, despite Quivira not using all of its water right. That it's more, you know, thanks to folks like Ducks Unlimited that are providing better habitat up north, the ducks and geese have done better, the water, shorebirds, all those have done better. Does the federal refuge have to always use all of its water right? Why can't they share that with farmers in a more equitable, friendly fashion, I guess?
Thank you, Senator. And I know that water law is complicated and important. And I know that there are water attorneys at the department. And you can bet that I will seek their advice and look at this issue and rely on you to bring us your ideas about how we can make things better.
But would you acknowledge that the
Senator?
farmers I'll yield back.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
finish up.
Would you disagree with me, though, that the economics of the farmers is also important as it is the ducks and the geese?
I think coming from a traditional farming family who've been farming for centuries and centuries, farming is absolutely important. It's an American tradition. I support farmers and would love to find solutions to these issues, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Congresswoman, it sounds like it's been another long and challenging morning, and I've been at 2 other hearings, but I wanted to come back, and I know we're getting ready to wrap up, and I just want to come back to some of the fundamental propositions that your nomination is all about. The first is you get rural jobs. That is so important. And I'm not talking about this in an abstract way. I saw it when Congressman Neguse and I were putting together the 21st Century Civilian Conservation Corps legislation and a chance to create jobs for thousands of young people in the woods. And scores of vendors could sell goods and services as part of that program. And you didn't just say you're for jobs. You went out and you helped us actually get sponsors for the legislation. Why should that not be a surprise? Because you're kind of the league leader in terms of bipartisanship over there, in terms of actually getting people to go along with bills. So on the track record that we Westerners care about, which is jobs and collaboration, the kinds of things I've heard you talking about for the last couple of days is what I hear folks say they want in my most conservative counties. They say they want more jobs. They recognize that jobs and protecting our treasures aren't mutually exclusive, that you can do both, which you have said. And they sure as hell want everybody to get together and collaborate, which you have made your calling card. So I think I wanted to ask one more question about an area where, again, you've brought those principles, the question of jobs, the question of protecting our treasures and bringing people together. Another area where you've put those principles in motion, and that involves both water conflicts, which we have, as you know, all over the West, and trying to deal with tribal water issues, which is practically every member of this committee, certainly all the Western members, have those challenges. So give us a little bit of insight into yet another area where you're doing good, on-the-ground problem solving. And most of the members of this committee are from the West. So this is not an abstract issue. This is the real world we see when we go home and we have those town hall meetings. Tell us a little bit about what you have done on resolving water conflicts and tribal water infrastructure, 2 separate issues where I know you have a good track record.
Right. Thank you, Senator. And what I'll say is, you know, when I think about tribal water infrastructure, I'm reminded just recently, a few articles that I read about people on the Navajo Nation having to drive 20 miles just to fill up some water barrels. Some of these people may already have running water, but their water's polluted. And I think in 2021, every single American should have an opportunity to have safe and healthy drinking water. This is a human right, in my opinion. And I mentioned earlier that, yes, my grandmother didn't get running water at her village until 1975. I learned early on how to conserve water because when you're hauling buckets of water across the village on a dusty road, you don't want to spill a drop of it. And I think that not one drop of water has come into or left our planet in 4.6 billion years. It's just that the climate change has caused our water to move in different areas, so we need to protect the water that we have. I am all for ensuring that we can come to solutions with tribal water infrastructure, that we can look at water in a new lens in 2021 when we know climate change is a drastic issue, especially in the West with the droughts that we have. And I hope that we can find ways to conserve, recycle, move all of those issues forward so that nobody is stuck in a desert without any water to drink, essentially.
The Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs in my state, and I appreciate the courtesy of my friend, the chairman. I'll just wrap up real quickly. They are sure looking for your new lens in terms of trying to deal with these tribal water issues, and Warm Springs is not alone. I can look right down this committee, and we see so many states represented by this committee who have these challenges with significant tribal populations trying to resolve, water issues. And when you're talking about tribal populations, by dint of that discussion, you get into the broader water conflict, questions, particularly in the West where there's scarcity. And as we wrap this up, I just want to make the case again that we started considering your nomination really early yesterday. I think you had some of the same sort of questions, today. We don't have people come back twice, very often. And I just want you to know, not only am I going to support you, but I'm going to speak for you on the floor of the Senate because I think you have made the case beyond a doubt that you'll be there for rural jobs. You'll do it in a way that isn't divorced from protecting our treasures, which is in my part of the world. We want jobs and environmental protection. We see them two sides of the same coin. I think you get it. And I'll tell you the single biggest difference, and I talk about these issues with my friend Senator Manchin all the time, and all my Western colleagues hear it. When we go home, the number one thing farmers, and ranchers, and environmental folks say they want is they want people to try to come together. They want to find a collaborative approach. And if you're talking about that being your priorities, you led the league over there in the House of Representatives in terms of people coming together. And when Congressman Neguse and I were looking for somebody who could help us, we said, we got a big idea. Really goes back almost to FDR, 21st Century Civilian Conservation Corps. We said, we need somebody good who people like and want to work with to go get us some House sponsors. That somebody was you. So I'm very appreciative. And as we move to wrap up the consideration of this important nomination, I want to clear I'm all in.
Thank you.
In supporting Congresswoman Haaland, and we'll hopefully get a chance to make those points on the floor of the United States Senate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I gotta go. I have to go.
With that, we have a few more questions that we have senators that would like to ask if possible. And then I'm going to maybe have to leave. If I leave early, then Senator Barrasso will continue. But right now, we have a few. I'm going to submit my questions. And I just want to thank you for coming back and being so diligent and doing such a good job. I really appreciate Congresswoman Haaland very much. And with that, I'm going to turn my time over to Senator Barrasso right now for questions.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. We have a couple of different things, and people have these questions because we're very concerned about our communities and where we live, the jobs that are included and related, and this major role that the Department of Interior plays in the lives and the livelihoods of so many people in our home states. On February 4th of this year, just a couple of weeks ago, I sent Acting Interior Secretary a letter which included 22 specific questions about his secretarial order banning oil and gas leasing on federal lands and waters for 60 days. On Monday, the Acting Secretary sent a response which largely restates his secretarial order and fails to answer my specific questions. So I'm going to resubmit my 22 questions that will be addressed to you in writing and be part of the hearing record for this hearing. Now, to me, it's unconscionable that the people of Wyoming cannot get a straight answer from this department. And I know you're not in that position now, but there is an acting secretary who is refusing to answer the questions. So can I get your commitment that you will answer my questions as they're coming to you in writing?
Yes, Senator.
I appreciate that, because I know the staff at the department is going to help you respond to the written questions from all of us in the committee, and I'm confident that with your help we can get answers to these questions, so thank you. I want to follow up a little bit. We've had questions about the Endangered Species Act. It's an important conservation tool, as you've said, that was enacted to protect species from extinction. The proper application of the law has resulted in the recovery of several species. It's important to me that the law be applied in a responsible manner so that we can protect the species that truly need protection. Yesterday, when you were asked why you would sponsor legislation that would put the grizzly bears under permanent federal protection permanently, your bill in the House with your name on it, you said, "I imagine at the time I was caring about bears." Well, I want to make sure you care about the law. There's a law of the land. Will you commit to doing everything in your power to fight the frivolous lawsuits and delist species that government scientists have concluded are fully recovered?
Thank you, Ranking Member Barrasso. And I know that the Endangered Species Act is extremely important, as you said. If I'm confirmed, I would seek partnerships with states, with tribes, with local communities to talk about this important issue. And
I'm talking about the law.
Sir, I will always follow the law.
Thank you. The global pandemic has created an unprecedented situation that has kept people isolated for almost a year. One way that people have coped with all of the restrictions from the pandemic has been by visiting national parks and public lands. You were critical of efforts to open federal land during the pandemic, even though it was done in coordination with state and local health departments. It's important to me that we are ensuring that the public has a place to go during this public health crisis, when there are very few other options. Will you protect access to our national parks and other public lands during the pandemic?
Ranking Member Barrasso, yes. I believe now that President Biden is in office, there is a mask mandate on our public lands and in our national parks, and I feel that if everyone does their part to social distance and be careful and wear their masks, that we will have more of those opportunities.
Yesterday, you said you wanted to move forward with President Biden's Build Back Better plan that would, as you said, create millions of jobs in clean energy, your quote from yesterday. So recently, John Kerry claimed that the fastest growing job before COVID, he said, was solar technician. And he said that the administration would give fossil fuel workers, in his words, better choices. And that the Washington Post fact checker then just looked into what former Senator and Secretary of State Kerry had to say. This is what the Washington Post fact checker said. They said he was offering false hope from the administration with a misleading use of statistics. The Washington Post went on and said it identified about 10,400 new wind and solar jobs over the next 10 years. We're talking about maybe 1 million energy jobs being lost, and the Washington Post says of John Kerry, you're talking about 10,000 jobs relative to 1 million? Do you have any evidence to dispute what the Washington Post has said about the statements coming out of this administration and the false hope being offered?
Senator, what I can say is I'm going to fight hard for every single job. I want people to work. I know what that's like, and I promise you that wherever I have opportunities, I will take them to make sure that people have secure futures. Every family deserves to have a roof over their head.
Well, we've heard similar types of rhetoric that we've heard from this administration and from John Kerry back in 2009 under the Obama administration, and we ended up with failures like Solyndra. The promise of green jobs to ended up with billions of wasted taxpayer dollars, bankrupt companies, and almost no actual jobs. Senator Daines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Haaland, good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
During the course of the last couple of days, Representative Haaland, you've implied that you would virtually blindly follow President Biden in his positions on energy and other important issues for the West, like land management. I can tell you, folks back home are really concerned about the lurch to the left of this administration. And if confirmed, you would be 8th in line in succession of the presidency of the United States. Isn't the role of a cabinet secretary to advise the president on these important issues, not just follow him blindly?
Senator, the way I have always taken any position I've had is I feel that I'm part of a team. And if I'm confirmed, it's working with all of the other cabinet secretaries, as well as with President Biden, and acting as a team. And of course, as I've mentioned many times, Congress is a co-equal branch of government. I don't think we can move these important issues forward by ourselves. We need to work together.
Thank you. Just the answer we kept getting, we're going to follow President Biden, and I'm hoping you would be a leader that would advise him where you want to go, and not just blindly follow, frankly, his leadership right now that's moving this country to very anti-conventional sources of energy and so forth. I want to follow up on my 30-30 question. You were the leader in the House on that legislation. It is President Biden's initiative. You're also the author of that resolution in the House. You clarified that you're seeking to preserve 30% of all land, including private land. What executive authorities do you have and will you use to accomplish that?
Senator, I don't have all the details of how President Biden intends to move the 30 by 30 initiative forward, but I do understand that he's hoping for many different folks to work together to achieve that. I was proud to support that. I know your former colleague, Senator Tom Udall, introduced it on this side of the Capitol. It's the 30 by 30 is the number that scientists believe we should conserve if we want to have a future for our grandchildren. And I feel like it's an exciting thing to start talking about the possibility of achieving that.
So there are multiple environmental laws that guide actions on federal lands, as you well know, NEPA, ESA, HHPA. In what meaningful ways do you believe our public lands are not being conserved?
Of course, yes, I know there's a plethora of laws out there that protect our public lands. Senator, I'd be happy to take a look at that and answer your question in its entirety and submit it for your consideration.
Thank you. You know, the USGS has already reported that 30% of our lands are in conservation status, so it's not clear to me what we're trying to accomplish with that resolution, but look forward to having further discussions on it.
Yes, I do too.
I know that my Colorado colleague, Senator Hickenlooper, wasn't able to ask a question about the BLM out west. Moving the BLM out west has made it easier for Montanans to connect with the agency that manages large areas of land in our state. Nice to have them in the same time zone. On March 10th of last year, you said that the Department of Interior was attempting to dismantle the Bureau of Land Management by moving the headquarters to Colorado. Why do you believe that moving the BLM headquarters to Grand Junction was so wrong?
Senator, at the time, I heard from a lot of different Indian tribes, quite frankly, who were upset about that issue. Now that the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management office, is moved to Grand Junction, and additionally, I know a lot of career staff left the Bureau because of that. They didn't want to move. I think that we need to first consider the well-being of the career staff there and take a good look at the issue. I don't have any intention at this moment of changing things, but I am not there yet. If I'm confirmed, that'll be an important issue to look at.
So at this point, then, is your sense you'd keep the headquarters there in Colorado? I know Senator Hickman would probably want to ask that question. I'll ask it for him, for the folks in Colorado.
He has spoken with me regarding that issue a few times. Thank you.
Want to ask about some multiple use questions. It's very important to our public lands in Montana and across the West. Would you commit to a no net loss of timber harvest on public lands?
Senator, I don't think I can commit to anything at this moment. I am not confirmed, but if I'm confirmed, I appreciate knowing and understanding your concern in that area and would be more than happy to continue a conversation with you.
Regarding no net loss, what about grazing permits? Would you commit to no net loss of grazing permits?
Again, Senator, I'd be more than happy. I mentioned earlier in the hearing that I understand how important grazing is to a lot of ranchers in this country, and I'd be happy.
They're very concerned. They really are, as well as many of our men and women who embrace the outdoors and shooting sports. Would you commit to no net loss of hunting and trapping opportunities?
I support hunting and fishing, and I support the outdoor economy. I think it's important.
Would you commit to no net loss of it? The concern is losing it on a net basis. We look at it. There's a lot of concern right now about some of the your prior statements and what that might mean to policy outcomes and ultimately net loss of hunting and trapping opportunities.
Senator, I understand, and I promise you that I will talk with you. I will do my best to make sure that that those folks have opportunities to have their voices heard.
Senator Ross, can I ask one more question? You okay in time? Thank you. If you put up chart number 4, and Representative Haaland, I appreciate your patience with all the questions you're receiving here, and I thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for your answers. During our meeting, when I asked you about active forest management, you responded that NEPA comment periods needed to be longer. And behind me is a map of a forest project that was proposed by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, a great wildlife conservation organization headquartered in Missoula, Montana. Half of the project area burned because it was delayed by litigation. It was, in fact, burned while it was middle of that delay. Do you really believe that extending the NEPA comment period is the best way to increase the scale and the scope of active forest management?
I'm not saying that extending is the best way. During our conversation, Senator, I think I was referring to the idea of public comment periods with respect to, for example, areas in my state where folks don't have access to internet, for example. They were taking comments only on the internet, and if you don't have internet and if you don't have computers, it's difficult to make your voice heard. I think what we need to do is make sure that folks who have opportunities and a means to weigh in when these issues are important to them. I'm not sure if lengthening that process is the answer, but certainly make sure that the public comment periods are real.
When we look at
Senator, Senator Murkowski, we promised the nominee that she'd be done at about noon, so that.
Thank you. I will yield to Senator Murkowski, or the chair.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Daines. Hopefully I'll ask a question that'll work for you as well. Representative Haaland, again, thank you for your endurance here on day 2. You, in response to Senator Hyde-Smith, when talking about the issue of affordability, this is a matter that is of extreme interest to me. Of course, we come from one of the highest cost energy states in the country in terms of the rates that people pay for their power to keep warm in a cold place. And so this is very personal. And your story about your grandmother not receiving power and water to her community until the mid-'70s is something that, as you know, we still live in far too many of our villages, primarily Alaska Native villages. And one of the bright spots, certainly for those in the North Slope communities, is that with oil, those families have been able to not only heat their homes, but to do so in a way that is more affordable, to not only have the basics that we would understand in terms of staying warm and having water, but also the benefits of a public safety system, the benefits of transportation access, the benefits of schooling. And so I just ask you, as you look to the realities of American energy and how people are situated, that some of our most vulnerable in this country, the energy vulnerability is a very real question, a very real issue. And so how we can help with jobs and also making this critical component of people's lives available to them. Sometimes our reality is that it is not the energy solution to have solar in Utqiagvik, but the opportunities that present themselves with natural gas, with the base resource that we have up there, is something that I just ask you to be understanding of them and their situation. I want to raise also the situation with many of our remote communities, primarily Alaska Native villages, that are reliant on so many of these policies that are in play right now. Many in this committee have heard me speak at length about the community of King Cove, a small community of 800 people out in southwest Alaska, cut off from a major runway that can allow them an opportunity to get their people to safety when weather shuts them in on average 100 days a year. In 2013, the Secretary of the Interior turned her back on those people and said that somebody needed to be thinking about the birds. In the meantime, those people in King Cove have endured over 100 medevacs since the time that life-saving 10-mile, one-lane gravel non-commercial use road was denied. And our Coast Guard has been called in for multiple medevacs to get these people to safety. So I'm going to ask you if you will commit to, at a bare minimum, to meeting with the people of King Cove to discuss their plight and to hear their concerns, and do this, if you are confirmed, very early within your tenure.
Senator, absolutely. Thank
Okay.
you. And thank you for sending me your memo. I took the liberty of reading more about the issues in King Cove. As you know, I feel very strongly that everybody deserves to have medical attention when they need it, and I appreciate you caring so much about the people there.
Well, I am passionate about them. I'm also passionate about our Alaska Native veterans who have not yet received entitlement to their Native allotments. We passed the bill last year to help allow for that processing, but until we can get these PLOs, these public land orders, withdrawn so that there is an availability of selection, they are being denied their entitlement to their land, their allotments, and that is, again, something where I'm very passionate about and would hope that you would understand there. My time is almost expired, but let me raise the issue that was just shared on the 30 by 30 and your commitment. Our reality is that we've already met the 30% in terms of our waters, lands and waters in conservation status. 66% of all National Park Service lands in the country are in Alaska. 29% of all BLM lands in the country are in Alaska. 25.5% of all Fish and Wildlife Service lands in the country are in Alaska. 12% of all Forest Service lands in the country are in Alaska. We have, as you know, ANILCA, an Alaska National Interest Land Claims Act, which which pretty much established all that I have shared with you, or a good bulk of it. But our reality was, the deal at that time in 1980 was, we've got enough in conservation status in Alaska. We are doing more than our share, more, and we're happy. We love our parks. We love the opportunities that we have on our lands, but we also believed very much in the commitment that the federal government made with ANILCA, that the no more clause meant no more. And so that is something that, as we look at this 30-30 provision and the direction that President Biden is advancing under this executive order, it causes us some degree of alarm, because we have received no assurance that ANILCA, as we understand it, and as was agreed, will be respected as this administration is looking to put yet more lands and waters in conservation status. So I don't know if you'd care to comment about that, but that again is a very, very important matter to us.
Senator, thank you so much. I appreciate everything that you do for your state, and I look so forward to working with you. I promise you I'll follow the law. I know how important these issues are to you and to the people in your state, and I look forward to...
So you would agree that with ANILCA and the no more clause, that's the law, that what we have in conservation status will not be impacted by this 30 by 30 initiative?
I look forward to, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know what that full initiative looks like, but I absolutely respect everything that you have said, and I appreciate it and look forward to working with you, and that I will absolutely follow the law. And thank you, Senator Murkowski.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Heinrich.
I don't think I have any more questions if we want to wrap up.
Senator Marshall, do you have a final wrapping question?
Just one?
Please, proceed.
Okay, again, if you haven't been able to tell yet, I'm passionate about the great outdoors, fishing and hunting, hiking, boating, and I want to make sure that my grandchildren have that same opportunity. The greatest memories of my life are times in the outdoors. Are you familiar with the Pittman-Roberts? It's where fishermen and hunters put our money where our mouth is.
Yes, I believe I am.
So again, from my experience on the Wildlife and Parks Board, I got to see where that money was used. But it's an 11% excise tax on guns, ammunition, and fishing equipment. And in my humble opinion, I think the states do a great job of figuring out how to spend that money. Any thoughts how you think that money should be used or not used?
Well, what I will say is you hit the nail on the head every time, Senator, when you say that the local folks, the state should weigh in on these issues. And I agree with you on everything that you have brought up today, and certainly the fact that we want your grandkids to have those opportunities as well. So I want to rely on you to bring your ideas forward, and any way I can help, of course, I'm happy to.
Great. Do I get one more, or do we need to wrap up?
Go ahead.
Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. I guess the last point I want to make is, as we think about government policy, is its impact on that single mom that I've been delivering the last 20 or 25 years. And the price of gasoline, the cost of electricity is so important to them. And our ecology, our environment, obviously important to me as well. But as I noticed as a private obstetrician, whenever the price of gasoline got over $3 a gallon, and that was just, I was looking back through some notes, 2015, I noticed that those moms would stop coming to their OB appointments. Many of my patients drive 30, 60, 90, 120 miles. So that's how in my life I would see the price of gasoline impacted people. And I think the same impact is overly felt by hardworking Americans who live paycheck to paycheck on their electricity bill as well. Are you concerned at all about some of the policies you've described, what it's going to do to the cost of gasoline at the pump and the cost of electricity for these folks at home?
Senator, thank you for raising that, and that happens a tremendous amount in my state of New Mexico, where we're largely rural. There's only one veterans hospital in the whole state, and folks do have to drive a very long way. And that's one of the reasons why I have been so supportive of ensuring that that broadband internet is a human right, because I know that telehealth is a way to help a lot of folks with those issues. So. And we've seen that during this pandemic. If folks would have had those opportunities, things would be different. I just want to say one thing. I'd love for you to look at, because you're a doctor, the ECHO program. It was started by Dr. Sanjeev Arora in my state of New Mexico. And I think you would find that a very interesting and beneficial program to our country. It's helped a whole lot of people, and you can expand it in various and sundry ways, and I think you'd be interested to learn about that.
I'd be honored. Thank you, and I yield back.
And I look forward to, I'll actually put a little packet together on Project ECHO, because I think our new member on the committee, and especially being a physician, will find it really interesting, and maybe even a great place where we can all work together. So thank you all for being part of this hearing today.